and get out of here. You worthless scum. I never imagined hearing such words, especially right after buying our new home as newlyweds. Great husband. Bob was extremely kind and gentlemanly when we were dating, but now he acts as if he shed that kind facade, treating me horribly. Since his parents moved in with us, things become even worse. I feel like I even have no allies in this house. But Bob is completely unaware of the true story behind this house and its ownership. It's about time I come clean and tell Bob and his parents the truth. These people thinking men are superior are in for a shock. How dare they tell me to leave? They'll soon realize they're too late. I'm Mima Sarah. We got married just last year. Before getting married, my days were filled with going back and forth between work and home, and I had often wondered about my future. Seeing my high school and college friends getting married one after the other, I began to think maybe it'd be nice to share my life with someone. It's cliche to say, but finding someone is a mix of luck and fate, and things don't always go as planned. However, my life took an unexpected turn. Excuse me, did you drop this key? That simple incident at a mixer led me to meet my current husband, Bob. I had carelessly dropped my house key, and he picked it up for me. Our conversation took off from there. The keychain, did you go to that concert? Yes. A friend invited me, and I became an instant fan. Do you know about it? I'm a huge fan too. I have the same keychain, but in a different color. Showing me his variant of the keychain, he continued, "What a coincidence. I don't know many people who are fans. This is exciting." Same here. Would you like to chat for a bit? Our shared love for the concert and the artist led to a spirited conversation. Which then transitioned to a cafe nearby. We exchanged numbers, and our relationship grew quickly from there. Life is full of surprises. Meeting someone with shared interests and getting married made me incredibly happy. Married life was blissful at first, but I distinctly remember the day the storm clouds began to gather. Bob started opposing the idea of me working full-time. People will think I'm making my wife work, you know? Couples working together is the norm nowadays. Besides, I've been working since I graduated from college. You're okay with people thinking I can't provide for you? Saying that he aggressively bit into his dinner roll? Zischnitz, I want to be the main breadwinner, and I want you to primarily take care of the home. So you want me to be a stay-at-home wife? Yeah, but not entirely. Maybe you could work part-time or something. Just because you say so doesn't mean I'll find a part-time job easily. You are just doing basic clerical work. After all, I'll look the other way until you find something. Just do your best. I didn't understand why, even when I was willing to comply with Bob's wishes. I was still subjected to such demeaning comments. Referring to one's wife as just someone doing basic clerical work and being condescending was unsettling. I began to dread our future together. Luckily, I found a suitable remote job, ensuring a steady income equivalent to part-time work. We Bob burned outside. I balanced work from home with household chores. It seemed to be working out well for a while. But then something happened that shook our relationship to its core. And one day, I overheard Bob on the phone. He seemed quite agitated. Though I couldn't hear the conversation, my curiosity was piqued. "Hey, what's been going on since this morning? Did someone call? My mom seems to have twisted her ankle, falling down the stairs. Apparently, it's worse than she thought, and she can't even walk properly. Oh, that's tough. How long do you think it'll take her to recover?" Bob then looked at me with an expression that seemed like he had a bright idea. "How about we let my mom stay with us until she heals? It would allow her to focus on her recovery. But if your dad's with her, we don't necessarily need to have her move in with us. Dad's getting on in age. You expect him to handle all the chores and care by himself. Sarah, you're at home, so help out." I couldn't argue with Bob once. He put it that way. Sometimes Bob can be very logical, and he tends to bombard me with sound arguments that disrupt my train of thought. I didn't mean it that way, but considering your dad's age and needing to support your mom on top of household chores, it must be a handful. When I was younger, it caused my parents a lot of trouble. It's not exactly paying them back, but I just want to do something for them. Finding Bob's words, I felt ashamed, realizing I'd only been thinking of myself. That's very considerate of you. Bob, if that's the case, I'll be glad to help out. But I've only met your parents a handful of times, so the idea of living together, even for a short period, is a bit nerve-wracking. Don't worry, my mom and dad won't bite. Just be yourself. Bob tried to brush it off with laughter, but in hindsight, I wish I could go back and kick my past self for even considering living together so lightly. It's too reckless to suddenly live with people you barely know. I wish I could warn my past self right now. Initially, living with Bob's parents seemed to go well. String 2. It seemed to go well, however, the harmonious balance began to shift over time. While my father-in-law was alright, my mother-in-law seemed to have an opinion about everything I did. Sarah's, isn't the rice a bit bland? I'm sorry, you're not serving this kind of rice in Bob's lunchbox, are you? Yes, I often pack leftovers for Bob's lunch. My mother-in-law let out a big sigh and glared at me. The leftovers in the lunchbox? Aren't you supposed to think about what your husband might want to eat that day and make it fresh in the morning? Just throwing in yesterday's food? Is that such a big deal? Watching our exchange. Bob, instead of supporting me, sided with his mother. That's right, Sarah. You're always at home, but you can't even properly prepare lunch. It's a bit disappointing. You can't even fulfill your duties as a wife and still have a full plate of food. I was at my wit's end with the constant nitpicking that felt like a scene from a soap opera. My father-in-law would glance my way when I was being criticized, but quickly look away again. If I continued this way, I felt like I'd mentally and physically break down. Initially, before we got married, we both agreed we wouldn't live with either of our parents. But now to have them suddenly move in with the newlyweds and face a constant barrage of passive-aggressive remarks, what was this all about? I reached my limit and tried to discuss the situation with Bob, but his evident annoyance became clear. No matter how much I spoke up, Bob wouldn't truly listen. So, I decided to approach my mother-in-law with humility, hoping she might be more understanding. Can I talk to you for a moment? What is it, out of the blue? To be honest, Bob and I have our way of doing things in our own routines. I thought it might be good to review how we live together and see if there's any advice you could give to help us all get along better. She snorted and turned her head. Reviewing your lifestyle? Isn't that just a result of your own lack of effort? And casually addressing the mother of the head of the family like that. I'm sorry. I just thought we should try to find a compromise so we can all live together more comfortably. I mustered the courage to speak. If she thought I'd stay silent and let her walk all over me, she was sorely mistaken. And I hoped at least that would get through to her. You're trying to kick me out, aren't you? After all, I'm just trying to teach you since you're clearly lacking. Aren't you even grateful? Grateful. Who's teaching you about the customs and traditions of the Johnson family? I've been taking you under my wing and guiding you every step of the way. I'd heard that my mother-in-law also married into the Johnson family, so I wondered how my father-in-law felt about everything. When I tried to catch his eye, he quickly looked away. My mother-in-law, being a woman of many words, could blow things out of proportion. At first, I thought if we lived together, maybe we could at least get along a little. However, as I came to the realization that it was impossible, words just poured out of me. I've had enough. Please leave. Just then, Bob walked in, witnessing the exchange between me and his mother. He turned to me, yelling angrily, "Well then, you get out, you good for nothing." He slammed the door open as he shouted, "Bob, when did you get home? I got a message from Mom after I finished work that you were being horrible to her." I rushed home, and what do I find? The tree. But I've tried talking to you so many times. I told you I want to get along with your parents, but I just don't know how. Do you always need my advice for everything? This is just like you, never thinking for self. That's why you're so useless. He pointed towards the front door, continuing his tirade. You're not fit to be my wife. Until you apologize and Mom forgives you. I won't either, so get that straight. Is this even real? Let's listen to me for once. Your stories aren't even worth listening to. I've said it before, just get out. His father, who was sipping tea nearby, avoided making eye contact with me. I remember the brief moment when he looked up. His expression was one of unease. Deep down, I was elated that my husband finally said what he wanted to, holding back my laughter. I decided to remind Bob of some facts. Wait, did you forget? Forget what? Do you not remember everything we went through to buy our house? That was the story of our journey to homeownership. Right after getting married, we started looking for a place to stay and eventually settled on buying our own home. I would have been fine with renting, but Bob was insistent on purchasing a house or apartment. Why not rent for a while? There's so much uncertainty with possible job transfers and children. Plus, saving up some more might get us a better house down the line. And why would we live in a rental? It's a once-in-a-lifetime purchase, right? Maybe if we save up a little more by renting first, we could get a better home. Bob slammed his hand on the table, raising his voice. That would be too late. With our marriage, I want to act like a proper head of the household. Don't you understand that? Just because you buy a house doesn't mean you've achieved everything. But if you feel that strongly about it, I won't oppose. Still, why are you so obsessed with getting a house right now? Bob responded, clearly agitated. A junior colleague at my office got married last year and bought a house soon after. Oh, the one who transferred here a few years ago? The one you often talk about? Yeah, he came here 3 years ago. Despite being bad at his job, he was sharp about this. I just can't stand that. I was taken aback by Bob's unexpected response. I decided to ask him for more details. Why can't you stand it? Normally, juniors should follow their seniors' lead. If they can't follow this simple hierarchy, how can they be trusted with work? Don't you think so? Everyone's different. Bob. Honestly, I was a bit put off by Bob's apparent jealousy and vanity. However, I knew he had a strong resolve, and once he made up his mind about something, there was no changing it. But the real shock came when we were about to sign the contract and found out we couldn't have the house in Bob's name. Chins, why the heck can't I? I've been working hard in this company right out of college, moving all around the country. There's no way I can't get a simple home loan. There's gotta be some mistake. Well, Bob was causing a scene. I scanned the document handed to me. At a glance, it stated that there were issues with Bob's credit history, making it impossible to secure a loan. I wondered if maybe we could secure the loan if it was in my name instead of Bob's. I decided to suggest this to him. However, explaining the details to a panicked Bob seemed futile. You just want a mortgage for our house, right? We can request another review with your name, but how about also trying with mine? You think they'd give a loan to a woman? It might be a long shot, but it's worth a try, right? If it goes through the second time, we'll be able to buy our house. I tried to calm a shocked Bob and decided to request another credit check, this time for both of us. But it's to ensure Bob wouldn't be shocked by the results. We had them sent to my parents' place in the neighboring town. Soon, I got the news from my family. The assessment showed that a contract could be made if it was under my name. Unexpectedly, we could secure the contract in my name, and I was relieved when we found out we could get enough for our home purchase. Regardless of whose name it's under, we're buying this house together. I didn't want to ruin his mood, so I only told Bob that we could secure the loan and kept the details about the names a secret. So in the end, there's no problem securing the loan, right? Yeah, now we can finally have our dream home. As well, that ends well. I knew it. There had to be a mistake. How can they deny a contract to someone who's been with a major corporation for years? Name value matters. Though name value matters, doesn't it? I didn't want to burst the now upbeat Bob's bubble. Truth be told, the house contract and mortgage are all in my name. Now, the reason we had to secure the home loan in my name and not Bob's is significant. Bob's carefree nature. I knew he'd previously borrowed student loans, but hadn't always paid them back on time. I won't forget seeing his apartment's mailbox stuffed to the brim with letters. Don't you check your mail? You might have some urgent or important stuff in there. I'll check when I feel like it. Sarah, you really noticed the little things. Back then, I couldn't press further, but I did notice some overdue notices. Looking back, our marriage has been full of mishaps. His credit cards often got declined because he didn't keep enough money in the bank. This recurring issue eventually led to his card being terminated. When I noticed credit card bills cluttering our home table, some were already overdue by 6 months. Hey, about those letters on the table, get the ones with the payment slips, I'm not sure about them. I'm too busy. Can you handle it? Can't you just take a look at what it's for? Suddenly, Bob became irritated and grumbled his way to the bedroom. I've got work to do. Can't you handle such trivial matters? I'll never forget how he just carelessly shoved his responsibilities onto me without even giving it a proper look. I went and made the payment as he asked, but given the significantly overdue deadline, it was no surprise his credit card was no longer usable. Considering the student loans and credit card debts, it's no stretch to imagine that Bob's credit history was a mess. Despite it being his own affairs, did he not remember? The words almost left my lips. Before a home purchase, Bob's carefree nature caused a lot of issues. I wonder if his mother is even aware of his credit problems and his inability to secure any loans or credit cards. Bob, seemingly recalling something after hearing my words, or a startled expression. You're not saying the house contract is under your name, right? There's no way you, a woman, could handle that? Then, noticing Bob's demeanor, his mother chimed in. What's the matter? This house belongs to Bob, the head of this family. You should just leave if you have an issue. Since when did this house become Bob's? It's always been his from the start. In fact, if you want to stay, maybe you should get on your knees and beg. For his mother to say something so ridiculous? Ignorance is a sin, and it's embarrassing. It felt like that phrase was made for her. Could you please stay quiet for a moment? If it makes you feel better, you can kneel before me right now. Why should Bob or I bow down to the likes of you? I got up from the chair and muttered to myself. Or should I start explaining to her? Suddenly, Bob grabbed my shoulder and exclaimed, "Stop it! Don't say anything unnecessary to Mom." What's the problem here? Ignoring their voices. I moved away from the dining table and went to retrieve some documents from the safe in the next room. Take a look at these. They were made when we bought the house. His mother briefly glanced at the papers, then tossed them aside. His father picked them up and started scrutinizing them. Sighing, he looked at me, probably pondering something. Is this some contract or something about the house that Bob bought? Shins looked closely. Both the mortgage and the ownership of this house are under my name. His mother almost jumped out of her seat. That's impossible. There's no way a woman could have a contract over the man of the house. Well, it's the truth. All thanks to Bob's careless personality, though. Who are you calling careless? She closed the gap between us in a rush. If she's gonna push it this far, it's time to lay all the cards on the table. You mean to tell me you haven't noticed Bob's recklessness? He rarely meets any payment deadlines, and I've had to cover for him most of the time. You really can't believe that? He's been out of the house since high school, so I have no idea about his life after that. And so what if he made a few mistakes at home? Why make a big deal out of it? I handed her a document detailing his credit history. What's this paper? It shows that Bob has no financial integrity because he's careless with money and deadlines. That's integrity. What are you talking about? You really don't know. If you did, you'd realize how embarrassing it is to have money and act like everything's fine. His father was glaring fiercely at both Bob and his mother. I had never seen him look so intense. He's usually reserved and avoids making eye contact. Bob and his mother, on hearing my words, turned beet red and started trembling. What I was telling them had shaken them to their core. She badmouthed your own husband. Don't you think you're lacking the awareness of being a wife? His mother always sides with Bob, but there's a limit. I pulled out an envelope. It's not just Bob, ma'am. Taking and spending someone else's money without permission is the start of theft. So now you're calling me a thief. That's a terrible accusation. Who's the real thief here, trying to steal my son from me? She seems upset, thinking I stole Bob from her through marriage. But I calmly told her, there are some strange charges on my credit card statement that I don't recall making. Doesn't that seem odd to you? When is she pinning this on me? Don't blame others. She's still trying to play innocent. Talk about not knowing when to quit. Didn't you use my credit card at the convenience store near the station last week? Turns out, an acquaintance of mine works there and saw you. Do you think I am? I can even tell you what you paid for. Want me to list it? So what if I did? Bob's my son, so anything that belongs to him belongs to me too, right? Making a big fuss over nothing. You have no common sense. It's ironic that a woman with no common sense is lecturing me about it. Using someone's credit card without permission is a crime, you know. I might have just confused it with some loyalty card or something. That's not gonna cut it. My friend clearly heard what we're saying. You're so sneaky, always doing things behind the scenes. Who's the sneaky one here? My friend told me you said. It's my daughter-in-law's card, so it's fine, while paying at the register. And you know, that store has security cameras. If I went to the police, they'd take action. You're gonna throw me in jail? Hearing this, Bob chimed in. We're family living under the same roof. Isn't it a bit much to hold a grudge over just a little credit card use? With all the nonsense, I just wanted this to end. I took out my phone and said, I've reached my limit living with the two of you. Let me say it one more time. Leave my house. As I said this, I showed them the phone screen, ready to call the police. If you continue to deny the credit card issue, I'll report as theft to the police. And I can't live with Bob anymore. You're gonna abandon our marriage just like that. Aren't we supposed to support each other? I thought I'd hear you talk about mutual support in a marriage. Even if you won't leave. I will. Accept the divorce papers soon. Bob pleaded, not wanting a divorce, while his mother kept muttering about the police being a bluff, and his quiet father remained silent as usual. Even for me. I said all he needed to. I already consulted with a divorce lawyer, and it was just a matter of letting them handle things. I never imagined they'd be like this, but maybe it was a blessing in disguise to see their true colors so soon. In the end, Bob and I decided to divorce. The lawyer said Bob and his mother resisted until the very end. At first, they were defiant, saying things like, "I might still forgive you now and you lack the awareness of being a wife." However, as the lawyer calmly explained everything, the confidence waned. Finally realizing they had no case, they gave in. After he moved out, Bob and my ex-in-laws continued living in the house without permission. But considering I own the house and we're no longer family, I don't owe them anything. Through the lawyer, I gave them a choice: move out soon or pay a much higher rent than market value. They chose to move out. Furthermore, having seen his wife's true colors during this debacle, my ex-father-in-law surprised everyone by filing for divorce. He had been quiet throughout, but there must have been things he couldn't overlook. Now, he lives alone using his savings, while Bob and his mother seem to be struggling. Bob tried to take care of his mother, but soon after, he faced issues at work. He'd been treating a junior coworker terribly at work, which led to reprimands from upper management and resulted in a demotion. Apparently, his salary was cut and his position was lowered. It was quite a sorry state. Eventually, he resigned but hasn't found another job, forcing him to live in poverty. This was what goes around comes around. After a split, I've been enjoying my solo life. Not having Bob and his mother around is such a relief. I didn't realize how stress-free it could be. Sometimes their actions still infuriate me, but I focus on my work instead of dwelling on it. Through a friend's recommendation, I started working at a new workplace and find myself tackling unfamiliar tasks every day. In this new environment, I'm also considering obtaining certifications, so my days are pretty busy. But I kind of prefer being busy. It keeps my mind from wandering, making things easier on me. Knocks on my days off. I love cafe hopping and enjoying some reading time. It makes me feel truly happy. Down. I cherish these moments of personal joy and contentment. My colleagues manage with this. Stop complaining when you haven't contributed a cent. That's what Bob exclaimed as he threw $300 at me for our monthly expenses. This the kind, ideal husband I thought I had was nowhere to be found. Holding on to that money, I smiled brightly and replied, "I contribute $2,000 to our home every month." Seeing the shocked look on Bob's face, I stood up to meet his gaze. "Do you even know our monthly rent?" "What are you talking about? It's probably around $100, right? Even if we lived in rural Nebraska, can one really expect to rent a 3-bedroom apartment with soundproofing for just $100? Holding back my urge to yell, I quietly placed the divorce lawyer's business card on the desk. Whoa, what's gotten into you? Calm down. Bob tried to soothe me, his lips quivering, but I calmly responded. It's not sudden. It's all according to plan. I stared at Bob with cold eyes, his shock rendering him speechless. My revenge has only just begun. My name is Michelle Miller. I'm a 35-year-old housewife and work as a piano teacher. Just before getting married, I worked officially at a music school. After marriage, I started offering private lessons at home. Juggling household chores, childcare, and teaching piano, my days are pretty packed. I married Bob when I was 28. We met at a charity concert organized by the piano school I worked at. Bob helped coordinate equipment and acted as a liaison between us and the venue. He wasn't exactly adept at his job, but he was quick to bond with the venue staff, ensuring smooth negotiations. Bob asked me for my contact information on our way home from the after-party of the competition. I accepted Bob's invitation for a date, and we began to go out together. Before I knew it, our relationship blossomed, and we got married on our 3rd anniversary. Bob and I have 2 children. One is a boy who looks just like Bob, and the other is a girl who looks just like me. People often say that boys resemble their mothers and girls their fathers, but in our case, it was the exact opposite. We used to joke about that. We were a very close-knit family, always going shopping together. However, once our children started elementary school, Bob began acting strange. For TAs, I'll be home late. Again, you've been busy lately, haven't you? My husband, who only occasionally worked overtime at the beginning or end of the month, suddenly had many late nights. He would always come home late, reeking of alcohol. He mentioned that since he switched to a sales job, he had a lot of client dinners, and I thought, Jay, working in a company must be tough. Thankfully, since I didn't accept students in my home piano lessons in the evenings, our children were never left alone at night. Because of this, I felt a strong responsibility to support Bob to the best of my ability. However, he gradually began to show a colder attitude towards me. At first, it was small complaints about meals or housekeeping, but soon he started nitpicking about how I spent money. Hey, what's for dinner today? It's unfair that the meal for the breadwinner, which is me, is the same as for you and the kids. Mine should be more extravagant. Plus, while I work too, and the kids are growing, they need proper meals. Stop being so selfish. Only young women can get away with that. Stop making excuses and listen to me. Forget it. I'm gonna eat out. What? Saying that, Bob left, leaving me and the kids in shock. I felt anger rising, but seeing my children frightened by Bob's outburst, I decided it was more important to comfort them. I chose not to worry about where Bob went. But from that day on, Bob's behavior changed drastically. Apart from weekday overtime, he also started working more weekends. Despite complaining, I saw a delighted Bob getting ready, and I couldn't help but feel this isn't about work. It's women's intuition, as they say. Observing Bob closely, I noticed many red flags. Though he never had an interest in fashion, he started buying brands that younger people would like. He would often be on the phone on our balcony late at night. And to top it off, I saw a transaction for women's jewelry on our credit card statement. The final straw was when Bob suddenly started dictating how the household expenses should be used. All these years, you've been overspending, which limited what I could do. From now on, our monthly budget is $300. Got it. $300? That's impossible. Just the groceries for the four of us cost over $500. That's because you're being extravagant. If it's from now on, I'll spend as I please. If you want to spend money, earn more yourself. True to his word from the next month. Bob only gave me $300. I managed with my earnings and some savings, but it was not enough to maintain the lifestyle Bob expected. I might have to consider divorce. I thought for the first time. Whether there was another woman or not. I used to think, if he comes back to us before the kids are grown, it's okay. I was trying to reassure myself. But when I considered whether my children needed a father who acted irresponsibly and didn't care for his family, I felt that maybe we didn't need Bob. I was still a bit hesitant, but one day an event happened that made me decide on a divorce. Would you shut up? It was a Sunday morning, and I was making breakfast. Surprisingly, Bob, who usually leaves early, was still home. The kids went into his bedroom hoping to play with him. Then, with a loud voice that could probably be heard outside, Bob yelled at them. Hey, why'd you yell out of nowhere like that? Isn't taking care of the kids your job? Stop slacking off. You're their father too, Phil, I don't need noisy kids around. I'm trying to get some rest here. Keep some quiet. The reason you're tired is probably because you've been staying out late every night, maybe cheating on me. I bit my tongue, holding back from saying that out loud. The kids were clearly frightened, hiding behind me. Seeing them like that, the idea of divorce solidified in my mind. I need to protect my kids. As we looked at Bob, who was now snoring loudly in bed, I made up my mind. Later, I started by checking my own finances. Could I maintain a lifestyle while continuing my classes from home? And what about the future of the kids? Up to my surprise, I realized that I could sustain our lifestyle just on my own income. The reason our expenses had shot up was because of the family credit card, which we had gotten for both of us. Seemingly forgetting it was a family card, Bob had been using it here and there. Sometimes, the bills even exceeded $1,000 a month. I'd only been checking the total amounts, but Bob's charges started increasing right around when he began working late. And they were all at fancy restaurants and hotels, the kind you'd go to for a romantic getaway. My love for Bob cooled to absolute zero as I realized he might be using our family card for trysts with his affair. But confronting him now might just make him hide the affair. So, I decided to first make sure our finances were rock solid, and then corner him once everything was set. Up 3 months after learning about Bob's affair, I managed to gather all the evidence. Bob had no idea that I was onto him, so gathering evidence was a breeze. No need for a private investigator. Then, on Bob's payday, I decided to make my move. Getting ready for a date with his mistress, perhaps. Bob was in high spirits that morning, humming while picking out his clothes. I approached him cautiously. Hey, isn't it payday today? The $300 you've been giving for household expenses isn't cutting it. I think you'd understand if you checked our finances. Will you stop with the excuses? It's all your incompetence. You've ruined my mood. He interrupted me angrily, but I persisted. But it's not enough. At this rate, we might have to sell the house. Bob sighed dramatically and ran his fingers through his hair. He took out his wallet, pulled out 3 bills, and waving them at me said, "My colleagues get by with this. You haven't chipped in a cent, so stop complaining." Saying that, he threw the $300 meant for our expenses at me. The kind and loving husband I had married was nowhere to be found. I clenched the money and smiled back at him. I put $2,000 into our home every month. I sighed. Bob looked at me with a blank expression. Standing up, I met his gaze. "Do you even know how much the rent for this house is?" "What are you talking about?" "It's probably around $100, right? Regardless of living in the countryside of Nebraska. Nebraska, can you really believe you can live in a 3-bedroom house with a mortgage for just $100? Holding back my urge to yell, I quietly placed the divorce lawyer's business card on the desk. "Michelle, what's going on? Calm down," Bob said, trying to soothe me with a twisted smile. "It's not sudden. It's all according to plan," I replied coldly. Bob looked shocked, at a loss for words. I stared back with indifferent eyes. The revenge has only just begun. Bob seemed utterly bewildered when I suddenly placed the divorce lawyer's business card on the desk. To make things clearer, I placed another set of documents on the table. "Seen them?" Bob's face turned pale. What does this mean?" "These are my income statement and our household expenses." What I showed him was our household ledger, the house contract, and the copy of the account book we report to the IRS. The ledger detailed our monthly expenses, and the house contract showed the monthly mortgage repayment. "You're lying about the $1,000 rent," he accused. "No matter how rural Nebraska is, it's a custom-built house with a soundproof room. There's no way we could live here for just $100 a month." I retorted. Indeed, the house we live in now was custom-built when we had our child, with both our parents contributing to the down payment. It's my dream house, made possible because I had a lifetime job and both our families supported us. However, compared to the housing market in our area, it was significantly expensive. But even with our parents paying half the price up front, our monthly payments turned out to be much higher compared to neighboring rental properties. We did discuss the price with Bob at the time, but he brushed it off, saying, "I'll leave it to you. Michelle, I used to think he trusted me. But now I see he just found the topic tedious. Why didn't you consult me properly? Isn't that a waste too?" Bob argued. "Oh, I did. You just didn't engage. Besides, half of the rent came from my piano lesson earnings, and ever since you only contributed $300 for living expenses, I've been covering everything else. You have no right to complain," I countered. Bob was speechless, but he didn't look convinced. He glared at me and then, as if recalling something, smirked. "Fine, my bad about the rent. But you should have shown me these papers earlier. I would have thought about it then," he said. Who was the one barely home to discuss these matters? Bob fired back. "All right, then just add the rent to the $300 living expenses. If you have an income too, why should I? Why should I bear all the expenses?" He seemed to be on the defensive now. Looking closely at the household ledger, he began marking it with a red pen nearby. This, and this. All unnecessary expenses. We don't need these lessons. Look, it can be managed in $300. You just spend too much. So, he has money for his mistress, but not for our children? I was boiling inside, but it was too early to bring that up. I glanced at the clock, then gave Bob a sweet smile. "Do you know the average monthly grocery bill for a family of 4? It's around $102,000, ain't it? That's why $300 is more than enough. On average, it's $870. At Wiki Collision, that's right. The average for a family of 4 is close to $900. Our grocery bills are usually around $600. That's after cutting corners wherever possible." Bob was lost in thought. Why didn't he realize that living on $300 a month was impossible? I began to feel a headache coming on. "So you can't live on $300? Do you get that?" "No way." "What?" "It's a lie." Settling, Bob started acting like a child, vehemently denying the truth. I looked at him with disbelief. What I once found endearing, his childlike qualities, now at the age of 40-something seemed just creepy. My colleague said he can live on $300 a month. "You must have altered the numbers," exasperated by Bob's persistence. I replied, Well, maybe Catherine, a 22-year-old newbie still living with her parents, might be able to manage with that amount. What are you bringing up, Catherine? The mention of the woman's name seemed to have caught Bob off guard, his confidence vanishing. With a cold sweat forming, he stood still. I laid out a few pictures and credit card statements on the table for Bob to see. Catherine Smith, 22, lives with her working dad at a major company and her stay-at-home mom. After the party for the new employees, one thing led to another with you. I know about your affair that began after you played the gentleman sending her home. How do you know all this? Because she told me herself. What? Bob was in shock. After all, it's rare for a wife to hear details of an affair straight from the other woman. Oh, I became friends with her. On social media, it was easy. Just approached her, saying I too was having an affair. She quickly spilled the beans, even shared photos. But how? In the age of information, you gotta be careful. She shared photos, like this one. I said as I placed a picture of them in a compromising position right in front of Bob. Bob, with eyes darting around, was sweating profusely. Oh, and she should be receiving one of these soon. Receiving what? This legal notice? I said that and handed Bob the certified letter. It was an official document my lawyer, whom I had contracted while gathering evidence, had prepared for me. As Bob read through it, his face turned pale. $5,000? I can't afford that. Oh, your father said that amount was reasonable, didn't he? What? He told my parents? Of course. I should be here any moment. Just then, the doorbell rang. I simply replied, "Come in," to the person on the intercom and returned to the living room. Michelle, is everything sorted? Thank you. Fit on time. That's good to hear. My mother-in-law stood behind her husband, looking utterly devastated. My father-in-law, usually a calm man, was red with rage. He approached Bob and landed a solid punch. What was that for? Dad? You're no son of mine. Betraying Michelle? You're the worst. I'm gonna knock some sense into that rotten character of yours. Bob was in shock, and frankly, seeing my father-in-law this angry was a first for me too. Right then, the intercom rang again, signaling another visitor. I told the person on the other side to come in. Come on in. Bob was speechless upon seeing that person. Know that everyone involved is here. I'd like to resume our discussion. Please have a seat over here. I said that and pointed to the chairs I'd set up at the end of the table. Both my in-laws and the other guests who arrived later took their seats, as instructed. After confirming that everyone was seated, I resumed conversation with a smile. No. Catherine, please introduce yourself. I'm Catherine, 22 years old. I'm so sorry. Bob invited me, and I couldn't refuse. That act is quite enough. Catherine pretended to cry and kept apologizing, but I cut her off. Caught off guard by my unexpected attitude. Catherine looked shocked. She probably wanted to play the innocent role of a young new hire who was invited by her boss and couldn't say no. Unfortunately for her, I knew all about her plans. You told me everything, didn't you? On Instagram, right? I'm lemon candy. No way. Catherine turned pale and stared at me as if she had seen a ghost. Her parents looked at her in confusion. I then spread out the printed conversation between Catherine and me on the table for everyone to see. The conversation detailed a shameful account of their affair. Catherine's parents seemed to be shifting between anger and embarrassment. After a while, her mother stood up and slapped Catherine. Ouch. What was that for? You told me you were confused because you didn't know he was married and got a legal document about it. What is this? You knew he was married, encouraged to divorce with his wife, and then there's all this trash talk. Catherine's mother seemed very sensitive about the subject and began to tear up. I did feel a bit sorry for her, but it was a mess her daughter had gotten into. Plus, it'd be good for her to know what I'd be talking about next. Also, seeing your husband every day and then hitting on another married man from the same department. That's some stamina. Wait, that's... Bob had a disbelieving look on his face as he listened to my words, but when Catherine seemed very flustered, it seemed he realized it was true. Theming. Bob stood up, grabbed Catherine by both shoulders, and yelled, "You had another man besides me. Who is it? Do you know how much money I spent on you? And you cheat on me? Rabada, you wretched woman? Son, you were the one who made the first move on me, even though you have a wife and kids. It's a privilege for you to date a young and cute girl like me. What? How can you be so deluded?" Watching the two of them bicker, I sighed, blaming their affair partner while ignoring their own faults. Really? There's a limit to how foolish one can be. It seemed like I wasn't the only one who felt this way, as both sets of parents looked utterly dumbfounded. Downs, Ackern's father, who had been silent till now, stood up. The arguing Bob and Catherine noticed and fell silent. Catherine's father began speaking slowly. Michelle, I deeply apologize for everything. We want to cover the damages for emotional distress. We know a dairy farmer looking for help, and we'll send Catherine there to work off the debt. She won't leave that place until she pays us back in full, and we won't be providing any assistance. I don't think this makes up for everything, but does this solution work for you? I'd rather not have her name appearing in my bank account every month. So, I appreciate your offer. Whether you cut ties with her is up to you. Catherine's father left with Catherine and her mother. As soon as they felt a sense of resolution regarding Catherine, the front door closed and Bob said something surprising. Hate out Karen had me fooled. So can we start over? I'll do whatever you say. I'll be seeking child support and division of assets. Hey, Ortiz? No way. Bob looked dejected as he slumped back into his chair. My father-in-law forcefully dragged Bob out of the house and took him back to their family home. Finally, it was over. Alone in the living room. I took a deep breath, relaxed, and then started preparing dinner for my children who would be home soon. And after a short while, she started preparing dinner for the kids who were gonna be home soon. Inch later, I and Bob divorced without any issues. Bob's father-in-law was furious, and even his mother-in-law said she never wanted to see his face again. Thus, Bob was cut off from his in-laws. Naturally, he didn't get any financial support and asked if he could pay me in installments, but I refused. As a result, it seemed Bob had to take on debt to pay the alimony. Moreover, his affair with Catherine was exposed. He managed to keep his job but was moved to a lesser role in the company. Apparently, he got a 40 salary cut. With his reduced income and the debt to repay, it's said he's been working part-time at construction sites at night and even on weekends. I heard Catherine is working non-stop at a relative's ranch. She used to love cosmetics, but now she's living in a place where the only nearby salon is run by elderly women in their 70s. She can't even afford makeup, let alone get her nails done. Every day, she laments that things didn't turn out the way she expected. It seems she's also being sued for alimony by the wife of another man she had an affair with, and it sounds like her liberation won't be happening anytime soon. As for me, I'm living happily with my 2 kids. My piano lessons have been gaining popularity. After I started evening classes just 3 times a week, they got fully booked by adults who wanted to learn the piano, and my income has been steadily increasing. I thought my kids would be sad after the divorce, but it turns out it was just me who felt that way. They even told me, "We like you even more after the divorce." I mean, you cooler. That made me feel a bit happy. Education is gonna cost a lot, but if things continue this way, I'll be able to save enough for my children's desired future paths. Listening to the beautiful melodies my students play on the piano, my heart dances with excitement for the bright future ahead. Hang in there, Emily. I'm here for you. Jason. Saying that, Jason firmly grips Emily's hand. Seems like they're too engrossed in the big event of childbirth to notice me. I resist the urge to slap him right then and there and decide to focus on my job. Internally, I'm debating how I'm gonna deal with these two. I think my colleague just gave me a shocked look. Gotta stay composed. For now, I should do everything I can to ensure the baby is born safely. After finishing up, I could peek into the room and see the 2 of them getting all lovey-dovey, completely oblivious. You did great, Thermally. The congratulations. Thank you. Jason. Right, the birth of a baby is indeed a joyous occasion. We should have a grand celebration then. I mutter, grabbing my phone. Judging by the strained expression on my colleague's face, I probably look pretty peeved. I call me mother-in-law. The baby is born, please come over. And so after inviting all the relatives, my name is Natalie Miller, a 33-year-old working mom, inspired by my mom. I became a midwife. My mother helped deliver countless babies, rejoicing with the parents at times and weeping with guilt at other times when she couldn't save a life. I'm watching her over the years. I found myself aspiring to be a midwife too. My dad is a man of few words, but he's always been there to support me in his subtle ways. Both are parents I'm truly proud of. However, there's one problem child in the family. My sister, though Emily. Living at home and unemployed, she often pestered family members for money. So when I got married, I distanced myself from her. I think you should do what makes you happy. Natalie, my husband Jason would often say. He was always understanding even when I said I wanted to keep my distance from Emily. That's why I trust Jason from the bottom of my heart. Jason works in it, and with both of us being busy, we rarely find time for each other. We don't have any kids yet. Well, I sometimes wish we did. I also think it'd be nice to spend our golden years just the two of us. Natalie, you shouldn't push yourself too hard. Take care of yourself too. He often says, for the record, we live with Jason's mother. His father has already passed away, and since she would have been living alone, we decided to move in with her. She, much like Jason, is a very kind person. She never comments on our choice to be child-free and is always looking out for me. I feel blessed to have her in my life. Although sometimes, it feels more like she's the one taking care of me. My days are typically filled with hard work at the hospital. That day, there was a complicated delivery, and I had to stay overnight at the hospital to care for the premature baby. That's the situation. So, I won't be coming home until tomorrow. I see. Should I pick you up tomorrow then? What about work? Work Jason's comment makes me instinctively check the calendar. Tomorrow's just a regular Thursday, no holiday or anything special. In my line of work, I can get weekdays off. But Jason, who works a regular office job, should be working on a weekday? Well, I actually had to work on a day off recently. They told me to take a compensatory day off in return. Really? Well, if you can pick me up, I'd appreciate it. I decided to accept Jason's offer without thinking too deeply. The next day, after a very tiring day, Jason and I ate out, and I immediately fell asleep when we got home. When I woke up, it was already dusk and my mother-in-law was cooking dinner in the kitchen. Mom, I'm sorry. Let me help you. It's okay, dear. Jason told me. You've had a tough day, haven't you? Just rest. I'm relieved by my mother-in-law's genuine and warm words. Anyway, dinner's almost ready, so there's not much for me to do. Jason was called into work. Not in agreement. During dinner, she kept glancing at me with a somewhat concerned look. Is something bothering you? It's just, how are things with you and Jason lately? We're the same as always, I believe. That's good to hear. I was puzzled by her demeanor and wanted to press further, but she deflected my questions. If it's something serious, she'll tell me eventually. I decided not to pry any further. From then on, Jason and I seemed to miss each other a lot. We used to go out on my off days if they coincided with his, or take a long drive with my mother-in-law. But he's been busy lately. We hardly see each other at home, and direct conversations have become scarce. Still, we've been able to keep in touch through calls and messages, so I've never doubted anything. Life was a bit frustrating. One day, encouraged by my mother-in-law, I went shopping with her. I was engrossed in our outing, trying to forget about work when suddenly, "Oh sis, long time no see." So, I encountered the last person I wanted to see. She approached with the same mischievous smile as always, still as beautiful as ever, which irritates me. I thought about escaping, but I couldn't just leave my mother-in-law behind while pondering. Emily came right in front of us. You still look exhausted. I can't believe you're my older sister. Mind your own business. Speaking of, since you're shopping, you have money, right? Treat me, here we go again. I sighed deeply at Emily's audacity. Ever since we were young, she's been asking me for money and favors. I'm not a pushover, so I've always rebuffed her. But she just doesn't get the hint. If you won't give it, I'll just take it. And so she started taking my things without permission. Next, when I was suspicious about my stuff disappearing, I caught Emily stealing money from my wallet. The parents and I gave her a serious scolding, but she didn't seem repentant at all. After that, she kept trying to steal from me and even went after my friends and boyfriends. Natalie is bullying me. She claims spreading lies about me. While my true friends stuck by me, some of my boyfriends ended up leaving me for Emily. This is why Emily and I have never gotten along. I planned to distance myself from her after high school, but I had been consulting with my mother, who's a senior midwife, and Emily had been visiting our family home, so we inevitably crossed paths. Only after I got married did we finally grow distant. And now there she is, right in front of me. What are you here? We're shopping at a mall near Jason's parents' house. It's a place you can't get to from my family home without a car. Emily never got a driver's license, claiming it was too much hassle. And she's not the type to use public transportations. Well, how should I know? By the way, you're still handling other people's babies. When are you going to have one of your own? What's that supposed to mean? Looks like I beat you to it. Saying that, Emily caressed her belly. Upon closer inspection, she had baby items with her. Is she pregnant? But I hadn't heard anything about her getting married. Whose child might that be? Enough is enough. My mother-in-law spoke sharply to Emily, who was grinning from ear to ear. We were enjoying our shopping. We don't need to be disturbed by someone as vulgar as you. Let's go. Natalie. I was pulled away by my mother-in-law's arm. Natalie, is she related to you? Oh, yes. I remembered that I had introduced Emily to Jason when I took him to my family home, but she had canceled both the pre-wedding meeting and the wedding itself. Perhaps my mother-in-law and Emily had never met. She's my sister. I see. Seeing the complicated expression on my mother-in-law's face, I sighed. Half a year flew by in the blink of an eye. Listen became even busier, rarely responding to my messages. And my mother-in-law seemed to be out and about a lot lately, leaving me to spend my days off alone. I was venting about all this to a colleague when we received a call about a pregnant woman whose water had broken being brought to our hospital. Her name is Retaliation. The name listed was Emily, my very own sister. My colleagues, seeing my shock, I asked, "Are you okay?" I managed a response and got to work, heading to the delivery room. I saw a familiar face. Stay strong, said Eisenally. You can do this. Jason, who should have been at work, was there, and he looked every bit the doting father-to-be. Faye, what's your course? I was sure I let out a very low groan. I thought I saw the doctor jump a little, but I couldn't tear my gaze away from the two of them. Hang in them. I'm right here. Jason. He was holding Emily's hand tightly, seemingly unaware of my presence. I wanted to slap him right then and there, but held back and focused on my job. My colleagues looked shocked, probably at the expression on my face. Gotta stay focused? For now, all I can do is ensure that the baby is safely delivered. Dad, please hold Mom's hand tightly. Jason's gaze was fixed on Emily, and he didn't even notice when I spoke to him. That's infuriating, but I need to concentrate now. And an hour later, the baby was safely born. Congratulations. Oh, thank you. Now, Jason's attention was solely on the newborn baby. One of Jason's strengths and weaknesses is his ability to focus solely on one thing. After all, he still hasn't noticed my icy glares. I left the delivery room, letting my colleagues handle the rest. Now, what should I do about those two? After finishing my duties, I peeked into their room and found the two of them being affectionate, oblivious to everything. Though you did well, congratulations. For some eyes, Emily, thank you. But Jason, yes, the birth of a baby is a joyous occasion. We gotta celebrate this big time. Mumbling to myself, I grabbed my smartphone, and judging from the startled look my colleague gave me, I probably had a fierce expression. I called my mother-in-law first. The baby's been born, please come. And as a result of inviting all the relatives. Annalie, were you pregnant? I smiled at the relatives who quickly gathered. Seeing my expression, my parents seemed shocked. My parents always know. They must have sensed my anger from just my smile. Calm down, everyone. I'll explain everything. I don't see that fool in your sister. By fool, she must be referring to Jason. Did my mother-in-law know something? With that in mind, I brought all the relatives to the room where the two were. Excuse us. Yes. Oh, Natalie. My sudden entrance left the two of them in shock. Mother-in-law's face, on the other hand, turned red with anger. It's that foolish son. As everyone looked puzzled, my mother-in-law was the first to speak up, and then turning to me, she apologized. I'm sorry for the trouble my foolish son has caused. Oh, you're not to blame? Did you know about the affair? Yes, actually. According to her, she had once seen Jason and Emily walking together and wanted to ask me about it. But seeing that I was oblivious, she couldn't find the right timing. So that's why she'd been acting strangely. I'd been investigating ever since. She'd been tailing Jason and had even hired a private investigator to dig deeper. Hold on. What about your job? Well, about that. He had quit, sadly. What? This new revelation left me stunned and just as shocked. I thought, how pathetic. Since when? About a year ago. Needless to say, this angered me further. The relatives, too, seemed to share my sentiments and were giving cold stares at Jason and Emily. You understand, right? Jason and Emily, once you're discharged, you understand, right? I get it. Wait, Jason looked downcast. Emily seemed sulky. Considering her attitude, I decided not to show any mercy. After that, I reviewed the evidence that my mother-in-law had gathered. But currently, Jason was being monitored by the relatives who had gathered earlier, and Emily was being watched by her parents. Thanks to the evidence my mother-in-law had gathered, it seemed likely I could file for divorce. Jason really is a fool. No, I'm sorry for my foolish younger sister. By the way, if you don't mind me asking, why is your sister like that? Oh, it's probably because of our aunt. Our aunt, a single lady without children, had always doted on Emily. With our busy mother, our reserved father, and me being rather loud, it was natural for Emily to grow attached to an aunt who validated her every action and pampered her. She became rather spoiled. My mother tried to distance Emily from our aunt, but they seemed to have been in contact behind her back. By the way, I wasn't pampered like that, and I often told her not to spoil Emily too much, so she probably found me annoying and kept her distance. You must have had a tough time. Well, she's been a handful since we were kids. I can't completely blame her, and I wonder where I went wrong with Jason. Hearing my mother-in-law's comment, I just gave a wry smile. I've been completely fooled by Jason. I'd always thought of him as a genuinely kind person. Was I just blind? Takes that script later. I learned that the relatives had questioned Jason. According to the story, Jason and Emily first met when I brought Jason to my parents' house. Next the playmare, Emily said, "Actually, I have something I need to talk to you about regarding your sister." She cunningly got his contact information, and it seems they started an affair from there. Even though I had warned him about Emily being that type of person before. Hey, didn't have any experience with women, even during his college days. I was relieved when he finally brought you home as his girlfriend. Oh, maybe he got fooled by Emily because of his lack of experience. I never imagined it would come to this. As I was lamenting with my mother-in-law, I got a call from Emily. I put her on speaker and answered, "Hey sis, send Dad and the others home. I feel like I'm suffocating being watched over. You brought this on yourself." Mom just keeps lecturing me. I let out a deep sigh at Emily's words. She doesn't get it at all. Emily, if you're willing to pay the compensation right now, I'll send Mom and the others home. That's impossible. I just gave birth. Plus, puctions, I don't have any savings. Then just endure being watched? Hey sis. Suddenly, next Emily's voice cuts off. Sorry, I took her phone away. Like right after, I hear my dad's voice and the call ends. But for now, I'll leave that side to my dad. I've decided not to go easy on Emily. After that call, any remaining sympathy for her completely vanished. Her community take to Cleary as sexual any mercy now. It doesn't matter that she just gave birth. Don't go easy on Jason either. Mexic really go at him. Yes, I'll make sure he can't recover. I firmly promised my mother-in-law, and we discussed the next steps. After a while, when things were ready, I called Jason and Emily. Jason was dragged in by her relatives, while Emily quietly followed behind my dad. Seeing her sudden change, I tilted my head in confusion until my mom, holding the baby, whispered in my ear, "In complete, when Emily called you, remember? She got scolded really badly then. It's come to think of it. I've never seen my usually quiet dad angry. Probably neither had Emily. Experiencing my dad's fury for the first time probably traumatized her. Well, you know why you were called here, right? 'Cause I'm truly sorry. She came crying to me asking for advice. You really think such an excuse will work on me?" Jason averted his eyes at my words. In the past, Jason had angered me. Though I now believe living together was a good choice. Initially, Jason had tried to forcefully move in with me and my mother-in-law without discussing it. After confronting him about it, we decided to live together after a proper discussion. I thought I had taught him not to upset me back then, but it seems that lesson went to waste. Or perhaps, due to that incident, he might have hidden his intentions perfectly. Don't you have any excuses? Ever since we were kids, you've always been the favorite. According to Emily, our parents always praised only me while she was constantly scolded. This led her to resent me, and being egged on by our aunt, she became even bolder. Then, when she heard I was getting married before her, she thought, it's always about my sister, and planned to lure Jason. That's why I called Jason and got him drunk. That's a pretty low move. We only got involved once, but she told me if you don't want me to tell sis, do as I say. Yet you seemed pretty close when you gave birth. Jason averted his eyes at my words. Why did I fall for a man like him? Is love truly blind? Just normally, I'd be repulsed by a guy who avoids confrontation like this. As we kept meeting, I genuinely fell for her. Then you should have just broken up with me. Well, I have successes and I still love you, Natalie, and I wanted a child with you. That's sickening. Jason looked pained at my words. Why is he making a face like he's the victim? What about your job? I wanted to spend more time with Emily, so working felt like a waste. And you two were involved more than once, right? I'm a midwife. I can easily backtrack from the birth to when you got her pregnant. If you hide anything else, I won't forgive you. Treasury at my father's words. Emily flinched. Then she confessed that since Jason had quit his job, they met almost every day and got involved multiple times. Both my mother-in-law, and I could only sigh in disbelief. I'm gonna divorce you anyway. No, please. I'll also cut ties with you. You'll never set foot in this house again. First, where the hell am I supposed to live? Both my mother-in-law, and I told Jason it was all his own doing. In fact, thanks to my mother-in-law hiring a private investigator, we found out another reason why Jason quit his job. If you're so desperate, I can refer you somewhere. Prison. It's not bad. You get a roof over your head, 3 meals a day, and even earn a little money. Jason's face went pale at my words. Turns out, Jason had been embezzling and was fired, probably to provide for Emily. He had managed to repay the embezzled money, which kept him out of trouble, but that money came from selling off my savings and my mother-in-law's possessions. I was honestly shocked, and I felt pathetic for not seeing it. Natalie, I'm not going to show any mercy. If you keep arguing, I'll hand you over to the police. He slumped at my cold stare, and just like that, Jason was taken away by the police. I called them in advance. I had just asked them to wait since I couldn't simply hand him over. Emily, don't you dare call me sister again. I truly despise you from the bottom of my heart. The last one left, Emily was taken away by my father. I never reached out to her again. Now where were we? Yes, let's get started. After that, we immediately packed our stuff. We decided to move to a new house in case Jason tried to come back. Now, we're planning to live in a place closer to my workplace, the hospital, and we've even invited my parents. This is a proper goodbye. Jason, friendly. Apparently, he was found wandering around our empty house and was picked up by some intimidating men in black suits. On the other hand, Emily's found a new job and seems to be working diligently. She's been juggling multiple part-time jobs. I heard this from my parents. They, in a final act of kindness, left her with just the house. She probably spends her days working herself to the bone in that house. She's so adorable. Since then, we've been living in our new home with Emily's child. Though she's retired, my mother has a wealth of knowledge about babies. And my mother-in-law has been ever present, taking great care of the child. Thanks to these two, I've been able to raise the child with ease and confidence. With both my father and I earning money, we're financially stable. Though we aren't bound by blood, this child was long awaited. Having this child has motivated me to work harder than ever before for bringing this child into my life. I have to be grateful to those two. Since then, the baby has officially become my child. I gave her a new name, that someday she might realize her origins and struggle with it. When that time comes, I intend to be right by her side. Until then, I aim to be the mother she can proudly boast about. Today, as always, I cherish life, hoping for immense happiness to come to Hikari and to the new life that's just been born. With that prayer in mind, I continue to face life head-on. The tie I handed over was tossed into the trash can at the corner of the room in the next moment. I, taken aback, blinked at Bob. We don't need cheap junk. Did you even check inside? Fun. Slowly shifted my gaze to Catherine. Wait, you're telling me that was from you, sis? Sorry, it looked cheap. Catherine's well-composed face transformed into something terrifyingly fierce. Seeing her like this, Bob was visibly shaking. I thought Michelle picked it out. Just because Michelle picked it doesn't mean you can just throw it out. Catherine was fuming, and I, rather inappropriately, was getting excited. I'm going to reveal all of Bob's misdeeds right here and now. I did a deep breath. My name is Michelle. I'm a 47-year-old part-time working housewife. Soon after graduating from college, I got married and had a child, so it feels like I've already started my second life. But with Bob still actively working and me working a full-time part-time job for the last 10 years, we haven't had time for things like traveling. So this second life is pretty much business as usual. I met Bob in college. It was just a regular college, but they had active clubs, especially the basketball team, which was top tier nationally. And the captain of that basketball team was Bob. He was tall and well-built, the team's main player and ace. Back then, Bob was quite popular, and I, being one of the team managers, never thought he'd choose me. But he did, even confessing his feelings for me. I felt on top of the world. He proposed when I was in my senior year of college, assuring me he was financially stable as he was already working. My parents, having also married as students, had no objections, so half a year after starting my senior year, we got married. We had a simple but decent wedding, and I was very happy. The first year of our marriage was smooth sailing. I had decided not to go full-time because Bob's company frequently relocated its employees, so I continued my part-time job. But near the end of college, I found out I was pregnant, and to ease Bob's concerns, I quit my job. During my pregnancy, my sister-in-law Catherine and my in-laws were super supportive, making me feel grateful for marrying into such a family. However, after our daughter Julia was born, our marital bliss began to fade. Julia, who often cried at night and was a clingy baby during the day, was quite a handful for a first-time mom like me. Catherine and the in-laws did help, but there were times when I had to manage on my own. I often found solace in crying alone. Bob, on the other hand, although initially supportive, began to frequently go out for drinks, and by the time Julia was 6 months old, he stopped helping with household chores entirely. Even on his days off, when I'd ask him to spend some time with Julia, he'd begrudgingly play with her. He'd play with her for about 10 minutes, then pass her back to me and head off to the casino or somewhere. "Hey, can you spend a bit more time with Julia?" "Uff, I'm kinda busy, you know." Whenever I mentioned it, Bob would just sigh heavily. Then he'd chuckle and try to reason with me. "You might not get it since you've never worked outside the home, but being a working adult is tough. If we don't refresh on weekends, we can't keep going. For just a patience." Bob said that and playfully tapped my head. I hated that gesture of his. But it's true that Bob is the one supporting our family, and I indeed don't have any experience in the workforce. Because of that, every time he said something like that, I'd swallow any retorts, and eventually, I stopped asking anything of Bob. So, without paying any attention to his family, Bob led a life that was hardly fatherly, only interacting with Julia when he was in a good mood. And this went on for over 20 years. But then something changed, and he began actively engaging with Julia. "Julia, let's go out and have some fun." "Okay." Every weekend, I'd watch them head out together, and I'd be left to tackle the household chores. Thanks to starting a part-time job about 10 years ago, our financial situation became more comfortable. But chores would pile up, so weekends were dedicated to cleaning and meal prep. Up until 3 years ago, Julia was on my side. She'd help out get me gifts, but ever since she started going out with Bob, she completely sided with him. The reason was simple. Bob would buy her things every time they went out. She'd come home holding bags full of new clothes, accessories, and other items. At first, she seemed taken aback by the gifts, but now she'd happily head straight to her room and try everything on. Maybe you shouldn't be buying her expensive things every week." "Phew. Oh, are you jealous of Julia?" "They can't blame me. She's way prettier than an old hag like you." The store clerk today even said we're a good-looking family. Really, that makes me so happy. I couldn't grasp what they were talking about. Who's this beautiful family? I thought it was just the two of them going out every weekend. Standing there with my hand on the doorknob, my eyes widened in confusion. The tears streamed down my face, but I was paralyzed. Right, oblivious to my presence, Julia and Bob kept laughing and chatting about their next outing. The resentment I felt towards them was overwhelming. The next day, on my way back from work, I stopped by a private detective agency. The staff there was very kind, and they poured out everything that had been bottled up inside me. Like right then and there, I decided to have them investigate Bob and Julia. A few months later, when I received the investigation report, I was stunned. Bob met his mistress almost daily, and on weekends, they'd take trips with Julia. But as I read on, even more shocking details emerged. Hell, this can't be real. Faced with Bob's blatant deceit, anger bubbled up within me. I'll never forgive him. I'll get my revenge. Just as that thought crossed my mind, a message pinged on my smartphone. It was from Catherine, inviting me to a celebration at their family home in honor of Bob's recent promotion. I hadn't heard a word about Bob's promotion, but I decided to accept Catherine's invitation. I didn't want to buy a gift to celebrate his promotion, but it seemed odd if I were the only one who didn't bring anything. So, I decided to get something with Catherine's help. We purchased a high-end, custom-made tie from a shop that made even finer suits than the ones Bob usually wears. The tie cost me $300. We'll put it in a plain paper bag so he won't guess what's inside right away. It's a surprise. I hope he likes it. I hope so. Imagining her younger brother's happy face. Catherine looked pleased. A part of me felt guilty, but my desire for revenge against Bob was much stronger. With determination, I moved forward with my plan. The day of Bob's celebration arrived. As we were leaving the house, Bob noticed the plain bag in my hand and couldn't hide his disappointment. Without a word, we headed to the family home. Sexual once Bob's parents and Catherine joined us, and we enjoyed a delightful meal. Shall we start with the gifts? Who wants to go first? Not we. Happy promotion. Dad. Julie handed him a no-brand handkerchief. Though it came in a neat box, it didn't look particularly expensive. But Bob, who usually loved branded items, accepted it with a smile. It's unusual for Bob, who's always loved branded items. Thus, with that in mind, I pulled out the tie box from the paper bag, and handed it to Bob. Congratulations on your promotion. This is from me and huh? The tie I'd given Bob was tossed into a trash bin in the corner of the room the next moment. Deep power lies. I shot Bob a surprised look. I don't want this cheap trash. Did you even check what's inside? Behind a puzzled-looking Bob. Catherine was smiling. Our eyes met, and I slowly shifted my gaze to Catherine. Wait, did you? My bad for choosing something cheap. Catherine's calm face suddenly turned fierce. Seeing her like that, Bob was visibly shaking. No, I thought Michelle chose it. Why would it be okay to throw away something Michelle got for you? Catherine's fiery anger made me feel excited inappropriately. I decided to expose all of Bob's misdeeds right there and then. I took a deep breath. Catherine, it's okay. I'm not upset. But still, it's really okay. After all, who needs a gift from someone they're about to divorce, right? Everyone present was shocked by my words. Bob was trembling, but tried to stay calm, speaking to me in a soft voice. So divorce? I know I overdid it just now. I'm sorry, okay? Wait, you think this is all about what just happened? What are you talking about? Bob, not understanding my true intentions, stuttered. Ricks amidst the tension, a nonchalant voice chimed in. Why not divorce? It doesn't concern me anymore. Julia, Julia, twirling her long hair between her fingers, continued without a pause. I mean, she's just a regular lady who's barely been out in the world, right? It's obviously better to have someone stylish as a mother. She was probably talking about Bob's mistress. Bob, unaware that I knew about her, looked uncomfortable. Seen them? I sarcastically said. Oh, so it's what was her name? Amanda? Isn't she more to Julia's liking? How do you know about Amanda? Bob was visibly panicked at my revelation of his affair. Julia, however, remained unaffected. I said to the two of them, dripping with sarcasm. See, you've lost your love for me, and you want to remarry, right? Too bad I don't have the time or the interest in someone else right now. Ah, well, you see. Suddenly, all eyes in the room were on Bob, who was struggling for words. Julia, for once, seemed to think something was amiss and stopped playing with her hair to observe Bob. Making up reasons to cheat and convincing Julia of them. You just don't want to look bad, huh? Bad, you? What do you mean? Julia looked confused as she pressed Bob for answers. It made sense, after all. Bob had told Julia that I was having an affair and was considering divorce. He even said that when he introduced her to his mistress, they were keeping their relationship a secret because I was reluctant to divorce, but they planned to marry as soon as they could. When I learned of this, my head ached. I never cheated, and the reason I wasn't home much was because of my increased part-time work hours. Deceiving our daughter with lies and luring her with gifts? That's just the worst kind of parenting. Dad, you said Mom was cheating, right? That she refused to divorce even though you wanted to? Was that a lie? It wasn't exactly a lie. But if it wasn't a lie, why is Mom acting so confident then? Julia's shrill voice echoed through the room. I replied calmly. He probably thought it'd be more convenient to deceive you. That way, after the divorce, it'd be easier for him to bring you around to Grandpa and Grandma's, or maybe it'd be easier for him to return to his parents' place. Probably reasons like that. It's a lie. Bob was visibly shaken and pale. I handed him the business card of a divorce attorney. Wait, Michelle, can we discuss the divorce? Aren't you planning to marry? What was her name? Vanessa? It seems Julia likes her quite a bit, so I don't see a problem. But we've been together for over 20 years. There's a bond. The bond you're talking about isn't with me. It's with the alimony you don't want to part with, isn't it? I said sharply, and he glared back, clearly struck by the truth. The image I once admired was nowhere to be seen. He just looked like a regular middle-aged man. It's only now that I realize my feelings for him have completely vanished. Is that true? Suddenly, Catherine's voice cut through the tense room. Bob visibly flinched. The real person to be feared in this house wasn't the in-laws. It was Catherine. She'd been engaged to a man who cheated on her and had been single ever since. Despite her beauty and being the center of attention wherever she went, Catherine rejected all advances after her engagement was broken off. You know I despise men who cheat, right? So why did you do this? You heard Michelle, a comet Ceteris? What were you thinking? Catherine's voice was steady, but there was an undertone of quiet anger. Everyone in the room was on edge. Bob was shaking, his face pale. Right now, the best thing you can do is accept the divorce, pay the alimony, and then cut ties with this family. Got it? Ventoys? Why? Because I can't stand the idea of such a terrible man being part of our family. Catherine shoved back. Bob's eyes widened in shock, and he slouched in disbelief. Those words must have hurt, especially since Bob had always been so close to his sister. The tears began to form in his eyes. Michelle should be the one crying. You don't have any right to shed tears, Catherine said, not letting up. Bob remained silent, his gaze dropped. I then decided to hand him in a document to seal the deal. Lections. Oh, by the way, I got this from Amanda, I informed him. You met Amanda, Bob exclaimed. When he saw the document I handed him, his eyes darted back and forth in confusion. It was a formal request for alimony? When? What's this alimony claim all about? Isn't it because you lied about being single? Bob looked as though he had completely forgotten that he had lied. And to nearly, it turns out. Bob met Amanda at a dating event held at a high-end hotel. He forged documents to appear single and approached Amanda to ensure there's no discrepancy with reality. He said the reason for the divorce was his ex-wife's infidelity. Though they were divorced, she still hadn't left. Both he and his daughter were struggling, but since she was doing all the housework, he treated her as if she were just a housemaid. He believed that if he found someone else to marry, his ex-wife would give up on reconciliation and finally leave. He kept asking Amanda to wait a little longer while he convinced her. When Amanda told me all of this, I was fuming inside. When I showed her our marriage record and explained that we weren't divorced and that I had never cheated, Amanda apologized profusely. She offered to pay alimony, but since she believed he was single when they started dating, I didn't feel like demanding it. I have a message from Amanda. She doesn't want to see you ever again. What, most likely? Bob was thinking of having Amanda cover his living expenses in exchange for the alimony he owed me. Bob's face was one of utter despair. Oh, Mom! I'm sorry. I had no idea. Julia timidly apologized beside the silent Bob. Having a 25-year-old daughter who can't differentiate right from wrong and takes her mother for granted is unacceptable. But you don't have to apologize, I replied coldly. The mom, after the divorce with Dad is finalized, you'll have to leave the house. Bye. I sighed at Julia's reaction. The house we live in is in my name. I inherited the property when my relatives passed away, which is why Bob and I started living there. I had mentioned this to Julia before, but she seemed to have forgotten. No matter how deceived you were, your attitude towards your mother is unacceptable. I can't forgive you anymore. I'm sorry, but you'll have to leave with Dad. No, please. Mom, let's live together happily again. Please, Elia begged, her voice filled with desperation. I coldly stared at the frantic Julia. Then, my usually silent mother-in-law chimed in. Bob and Julia, please never come back to this house. Waits. Mom. Bob looked up in shock at his mother's words. My mother-in-law was fuming, her face red with anger. Seeing her like that, Bob couldn't hide his shock and shed tears. Julia was just frozen in shock, seeing the usually kind-hearted mother-in-law change so drastically. I don't want to talk to people who hurt others like you. Please leave, she firmly said. Bob was taken aback. Suddenly, my father-in-law stood up, grabbed Bob by the collar, and dragged him out of the house. At first, Bob banged on the house door and shouted, "Let me in." But when the neighbors started gathering, he left with Julia, back at my in-laws. I enjoyed some tea and cake my mother-in-law prepared, finally having a moment of peace. I then filed for divorce, with the alimony from Bob. I became fairly wealthy. As for Bob, not only did I take the savings he'd been hiding, but it also came out that he had forged documents at the dating event. His colleagues, who had attended the same event, exposed his lies at work. As a result, he lost his credibility, and despite having been promoted, was sidelined. Julia made a significant error at work. While she wasn't fired, her salary was substantially cut. At Tingani, I heard she had an affair with a married senior colleague at work and is currently in a dispute about it. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I thought to myself, feeling somewhat detached from the whole situation. It seems that after being kicked out of the house, the two of them started living together. However, since I always took care of all the household chores, neither of them know how to do any, so their house is a mess. They constantly eat out, have no money, and they argue daily. On another note, Amanda, after breaking up with Bob, married her childhood friend. I heard through the grapevine that she's now a mother of twins. Even though she must have been hurt being deceived by Bob, it's good to see her moving forward and grabbing a happy future. I felt a sigh of relief. I thought our relationship with my in-laws and Catherine might end because of what Bob did, but we're still on good terms. According to Catherine, she considers me like a sister, so our bond won't break so easily. I'm really grateful to have such supportive people in my life. Grateful to have such a kind-hearted family-in-law. And guess what? Catherine recently got herself a boyfriend. He's 5 years older than her. Even though Catherine used to say she'd never marry again, he's so gentle and understanding that he could melt her stern heart. Recently, I heard from my mother-in-law in a secret sharing tone that Catherine has been sneaking bridal magazines into her room. It was heartwarming to see her act so cute about it. As for me, I was promoted to a full-time position at the company where I was working part-time and am really hustling. Life is pretty busy, but living just for myself is quite fun. I sold the house and started living on my own. It was quite a shock when all my moving boxes fit into just one cardboard box. Representation now. I'm slowly getting furniture that suits my taste. Living surrounded by things I love makes me so happy, and no matter how busy I am when I get home, I feel so refreshed and recharged for the next day. I often think I should have made this change sooner. Recently, a colleague has asked if I'd like to adopt a cat. With a cat. Sounds good. Just with these thoughts in mind, I decide to live my life, being true to myself. I had a feeling deep down that things would turn out this way after breaking off the engagement. Right after we got engaged, Rain became suddenly distant. He showered Jake with unusual kindness while ignoring my opinions, pushing for this wedding. I tried to stay positive and keep my spirits up, but I never expected him to announce the end of our engagement. Even though I saw it coming, facing it as a reality was a big shock. I really wanted to lash out at Ryan immediately, but I held back. It wasn't the right time. Just understood. I replied with a cold, calm voice. I hung up the phone right after that. It was Ryan who had mentioned breaking off the engagement. I knew it had to be done. There were a heap of issues to address right in front of me, but I decided to make Ryan pay for neglecting me and Jake's feelings. My name is Sarah. I'm 42 and a deputy director at a certain company. I have a 6-year-old son named Jake. I had divorced my ex-husband, so I was a single mom. The reason for our divorce wasn't infidelity or anything like that. It was due to differences in personality and values. Even though I was busy with work, I always cherished my time with Jake, but it seemed my ex-husband didn't feel the same. Probably he couldn't stand the fact that I earned more than he did. Our disagreements became constant, and considering the impact on Jake, I chose to divorce. I've never regretted that decision. A few years passed, and Ryan, my later fiancé, came into my company. As a business partner, Ryan was a regular employee, but he mentioned that he'd be promoted to section chief within a few years. Ryan, more than 10 years my junior, was 28 at the time. At first, I didn't see him romantically, but as he actively pursued me, he said he was attracted to my mature and responsible nature. Seeing him getting along with Jake during our days off felt wonderful, and after dating for 2 years, we got engaged when I was 42 and he was 30. After some time being engaged, Ryan said, "Let's actually tie the knot on the day of the wedding ceremony. I think it feels more special that way." I could understand where Ryan was coming from, but I wasn't too excited because I had already had a wedding ceremony with my ex-husband. Even though I invited friends to that wedding, the fact that we ended up getting divorced still weighed on me. I wanted to have the wedding ceremony as Ryan wished, but I felt hesitant. I honestly told him about my feelings, but Ryan brushed it off, saying, "No one cares about that." When he said that, I felt I had no choice but to agree. However, I stated I wouldn't invite any guests. I don't have many friends, and after already receiving wedding gifts once, I felt awkward asking for them again. So, I told him I'd only invite my parents. Ryan became unhappy with this. He said it would look unbalanced with his side having more guests. It'll seem like I'm showing off. Please invite someone. Feeling pressured, I reluctantly reached out to some friends. Luckily, they happily agreed to attend, but they declined to give wedding gifts. The customary gift for a friend's wedding is $300. Given the current economic situation, it's not a small amount. When I told Ryan, he clicked his tongue in annoyance. He was likely concerned about the increased cost since we wouldn't be receiving gifts. I got a glimpse of Ryan's unpleasant side, which made me feel uneasy. However, I had a well-thought-out financial plan. Since my divorce from my ex-husband, I had saved money, including some from even before that time. It wasn't a huge amount, but it was sufficient to cover the wedding gifts for a few friends. When I told this to Ryan, he clicked his tongue in annoyance again. It'd be better if we didn't invite them at all, he exclaimed. Just then, Jake came out of the bathroom. Instantly, Ryan's attitude shifted and he began interacting with Jake as if he were the perfect father. Without being asked, he offered to help Jake with his homework. Jake didn't seem to mind, so I let it be. Recently, Ryan had been colder towards me, but he remained kind, to Jake. That was the only comfort I had during our engagement. Still, I couldn't shake off this feeling of unease. Before we got engaged, Ryan was kind, no matter the circumstances. But as soon as we became engaged, it was as if he changed into a completely different person. This filled my heart with a sense of unease. After several discussions, we decided to go ahead with the wedding. Ryan took charge of most of the preparations, so I didn't have much to do. Months passed, and we were just a month away from the wedding. Throughout this time, I continued to feel that something was off. Ryan was genuinely a great father when he was with Jake. However, when it was just the two of us, he showed a colder side, and our arguments increased day by day. We were still only engaged, but it felt like we were living as a couple just going through the motions. To be honest, I wasn't comfortable. Jake looked up to Ryan and thought we were already remarried since he didn't understand the details. So, I couldn't bring myself to make the decision to leave Ryan. With my ex-husband, it was easier since Jake had said, "Dad doesn't pay attention to me, so I don't like him." However, with Ryan, he actively spent time with Jake, taking him out almost every weekend. If I put up with it and kept a smile on my face, we would be the perfect family everyone envies. At some point, I realized I had placed these constraints on myself, always holding back. Luckily, due to a busy period at work, I tried not to think about Ryan. As time went on, we were almost at our wedding date. We hadn't officially registered our marriage yet, so there was still time to choose a different path. But I thought it was too soon to decide and prioritize Jake's well-being in my actions. One day, Jake expressed a desire to stay at his grandmother's house. It wasn't an unexpected request. It was summer, and he was on school vacation. It was a yearly tradition for Jake to stay at my family home in the countryside during the season. So this year, he wanted to visit there again. Usually, I would have taken this time to enjoy some alone time. However, the circumstances were different now. Ryan, who had been cold towards me, would be at home too. I tried to persuade Jake to stay, but Ryan suddenly said, "I have a business trip anyway and can't take him out, so it's fine." Relieved, I sent Jake off with a smile. At the same time, Ryan left for his supposed business trip, saying he'd be away for a few days. We hadn't had major fights recently, but we bickered frequently. I remembered having small disagreements with my ex-husband too, so maybe this was normal for couples. I had stopped being bothered by Ryan's attitude and our arguments, but now that I was free from them, I felt refreshed. I tried to ask Ryan was on a business trip, but he told me not to interfere with his work, and I couldn't get any details. I became worried when I didn't hear from him, so I sent him an email, only to be scolded, saying it was bothersome. At that moment, it felt like a string inside me snapped. Until now, I endured, thinking that if I made sacrifices, Jake would be happy. But I had reached my breaking point, and that breaking point came abruptly. As things progressed, the day of the wedding ceremony next month arrived. Considering the guests who'd agreed to attend, canceling wasn't really an option. This morning, Ryan said he had some business and would join me later, hurriedly leaving the house. Because of that, Jake and I headed to the venue by ourselves. This being Jake's first wedding ceremony, he seemed truly excited. But as time went on, there was no sign of Ryan. He wouldn't even answer his phone. And moreover, I noticed something strange going on from the conversations of the staff. I learned that not a single guest invited by Ryan had arrived. There were attendance lists and seating charts, and since Ryan had been the main person handling things, there shouldn't have been any mistakes. The church ceremony was to start in about 30 minutes, but with Ryan nowhere to be seen. I called him. After 2 rings, Ryan answered with a lethargic voice. "What do you want? Stop calling me over and over." This wasn't the time for such remarks. I demanded to know where he was and why none of his guests had shown up. Sensing my panic, Ryan chuckled and said, "Of course they're not here. I didn't inform anyone about the wedding, not even my parents." I was left speechless. For a moment, I was silent, my hand trembling as I held the phone. Then, I caught the worried gaze of Jake and snapped back to reality, struggling to keep my voice steady. He asked, "So what happens to our engagement?" Even though we hadn't officially registered our marriage, we had been living as a genuine family. I'd made many sacrifices hoping for Jake's happiness. But to Ryan, perhaps it didn't matter at all? While feeling utterly dejected, I awaited Ryan's answer, finally with zero understanding of my feelings. Ryan coldly said, "I think we should break off the engagement." Although I had a hunch things might come to this, facing this reality was devastating. I wanted to lash out at Ryan right then, but I held back. Now wasn't the time. I replied in an eerily calm voice, "He understood," and immediately hung up. My course of action was now clear. While numerous issues lay before me, I resolved to handle them one by one and teach Ryan a lesson. Teach Ryan a lesson for disregarding my and Jake's feelings. The next day, Ryan called repeatedly. On the voicemail, there were numerous frantic messages from him, but I felt no obligation to answer. So I blocked his calls and sent a short message, saying there was nothing left to discuss. When he persisted with replies to the email, I simply ignored them and turned off notifications, then realizing I had returned to my parents' house. He came over. It happened to be when I was taking a bath, so my mother dealt with Ryan. I could hear them arguing at the entrance. My parents felt relieved when I decided to respond. But they warned that if the argument intensified, they'd call the police, hearing that Ryan clicked his tongue in annoyance and ranted, "Hey, what's this document demanding payment for the wedding expenses?" I found it at home. "Are you mocking me?" Ryan had finally shown his ugly side. Up to this point, he had only shown coldness. But now I realized this crude language was his true nature. But I was the one who felt mocked. I responded with a composed attitude, "Of course, after all, you were the one who insisted on this wedding even when I was reluctant. Moreover, you pretended to invite guests, and in reality didn't send any invitations. By all accounts, you should be the one paying." Upon saying that, Ryan's face turned beet red as he retorted. He argued he hadn't eaten or drunk anything at the wedding, and since he didn't actually invite any guests, he didn't want to pay. Annoyed, I decided to silence Ryan by confronting him with a certain truth. "You're still making those excuses after all this. It's just like you to prioritize the women you're having an affair with and bail on our wedding day with a fake emergency no given you. Didn't invite any guests. This must have been part of your plan all along." As I spoke with a mocking smile, Ryan stared wide-eyed at me, then muttered something in a low voice. "I wasn't just gonna sit back and tolerate everything. Once I decide to do something, I gotta see it through." I'd grown suspicious. When Ryan went on a dubious business trip, he refused to tell me where he was and blocked my texts given his distant behavior. Up to that point, I couldn't help but suspect he was cheating. I found a nearby detective agency, met with them a few times, and got them the case. Sure enough, they discovered Ryan was having an affair. The other woman's name was Kate, a 29-year-old waitress at a local diner. Shockingly, I learned that Ryan and Sarah had been seeing each other since a few weeks before our engagement. The detective deduced this timeline from conversations they had on their supposed anniversary. This meant that while dating me, Ryan had been carrying on with Kate as well. When I found out, I was less angry and more devastated. Ryan and Sarah's affair was, of course, still ongoing. Just yesterday, Ryan, being suspicious as usual, said he had business to attend to. I had a detective tail him, which is how I found out the real reason he bailed on our plans. Ryan, unaware I'd uncovered his cheating, turned pale and fled when confronted with the evidence. After that business trip, I consulted a lawyer with the investigative report that the detective had compiled about Ryan's infidelity. Even though we weren't legally married, I absolutely refused to let this slide without a fight. So, I wondered if there was any way to get compensation from Ryan and Kate. However, contrary to my expectations, the lawyer said that it seems I can't claim compensation from Ryan for his infidelity. We had planned to split the wedding costs, so I really didn't want to pay my share. I was wondering if there was any way to make Ryan bear the entire cost. And, in the midst of these secret consultations with the lawyer noticed something. Reading the investigative report, it became clear that Ryan was seriously in love with Kate, with multiple mentions of him whispering about marrying her someday. Moreover, the lawyer pointed out that Ryan seemed to view me as nothing more than a cash cow, with plans to ditch me in the future. It felt impossible to have a wedding in such circumstances. I was too heartbroken over the lengthy period of Ryan's affair to go through the entire report, but when the lawyer mentioned these points, I had to agree. The lawyer, from his experience, suggested that what Ryan and Kate were doing might amount to marital fraud and that there might be ulterior motives for Ryan pushing the wedding. I then asked if, in the worst-case scenario, Ryan was trying to ruin the wedding on purpose to get back at me, could I claim all the expenses for the ceremony? The lawyer responded that, given all the evidence at hand, claiming would indeed be possible. So, I decided to act like I was fooled by Ryan. At that time, I'd recorded everything, from his casual remarks at the venue to comments made at his parents' house. The detective's report clearly stated that Ryan's decision not to invite any guests was intentional harassment, and Kate was an accomplice. Their rather childish motive seemed to be to revel in seeing me flustered. Not knowing they were being tailed by a detective, they unwittingly provided all the evidence I needed to claim full compensation for the emotional distress and wedding expenses. I expressed my gratitude for their careless chatter. Now then, the wedding day, I explained the situation to the guests and converted the event into a simple dinner party. After refunding all the gifts, I headed straight to the lawyer's office. The lawyer was flabbergasted, saying he hadn't seen someone so naive in a long time. He promptly prepared the necessary documents for claiming compensation and emotional distress, allowing me to leave a prepared divorce notice and those papers at our home. That's how he got to where I am now. Even if Ryan anticipated a divorce, he probably never expected to face compensation claims so quickly. After he ran away, I received numerous apology emails, which I promptly deleted without reading. Such shallow apologies were nowhere near acceptable. Moreover, I knew that a legal notice had been sent to Kate, detailing everything. Given that she lived with her parents, it was only a matter of time before everything came to light. Things were progressing so smoothly that I had to work hard to contain my excitement. A few days passed, and Ryan and Kate came to see me. Ryan looked pale and gaunt, as if he had been through a lot these past days. However, Kate seemed indifferent, behaving as if this was someone else's problem. And as for me faking sickness, I was really feeling bad the other day, and I just called Ryan for help. I hadn't yet told either of them about the solid evidence I had gathered. I had only told them that I had hired a detective, so Kate probably thought she could feign ignorance. To make matters worse, she started to lash out at me. You knew I was living with my parents when you sent that certified mail, right? Thanks to you, my mom found out everything and I got kicked out. Now I should be the one asking for compensation. I couldn't help but laugh when I heard that. Kate looked stunned, yet unable to comprehend why I found it funny. It seemed like Kate planned to put all the blame on Ryan and get away without any responsibility. But I wasn't gonna let that happen. We are both adults in our late 20s, and she should be accountable for her actions. I shot Kate a stern look, and she flinched, her eyes darting left and right. Sorry to break it to you, but I have evidence proving that you knew Ryan was involved with someone else when you started seeing him. Ryan, you were just using me to end up with your side chick, weren't you? You approached me for my money from the start, and when it came time to dump me, you tried to humiliate me during our wedding. Am I right? According to the detective's findings, the two knew each other before meeting me. Apparently, they were dating at that time. However, Ryan was burdened with student loans from college, unable to lead a lavish life. And Kate, even though she had a massive debt from her parents and banks, was still living on a part-time job, unable to repay anything. Even though they were aware of their romantic feelings for each other, they believed they couldn't find happiness by marrying in their current situation. Thus, they hatched a despicable plan, and I unfortunately became their victim. I became their target. Well, I was a single mother. I had saved enough money to raise Jake on my own. Despite being a single mom, I held a significant position in my company. Ryan probably thought I was making a good amount of money and approached me to execute his marriage fraud plan. The reason he didn't officially marry me was that he didn't want any blemish on his public record. He probably thought living together would be treated as if we were married and hoped to get some of my savings when we broke up. Fortunately for him, the savings I had been accumulating were my separate property and wouldn't be subject to division. When I told him this, Ryan was devastated. Start kidding? If I was gonna get sued, hey, at least thought I could get a good chunk through property division. As expected, his reaction just made me shake my head and chuckle. I then turned to Kate, ready to expose her ambitions. Didn't you have an illness when you were younger that prevents you from having children for the rest of your life? You wanted a family with Ryan and saw an opportunity with me since I had Jake, right? You also knew I had money. But targeting me was your mistake. I'm not that gullible. When I confronted them, they both recoiled in fear. I was most hurt by the fact that Ryan was pretending to be kind to Jake to eventually take him away from me. There was nothing left to discuss with them directly. I told them that from now on, all dealings would be through my attorney. But Ryan made one last desperate plea. Flirtation, I think I was a good father figure for Jake. Rick, you saw how close we were. Maybe we should hear what Jake thinks. The mere mention of Jake's name by Ryan disgusted me. And to add insult to injury, Kate shouted, exactly. Jake would definitely prefer a young mom like me over an old lady like you. I was left speechless by their audacity. As I stood there in shock, I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. It was Jake, who had been doing his homework upstairs. Upon seeing Ryan and Kate, Jake immediately said, "Someone who hurts my mom isn't my dad." Ryan was visibly shaken by Jake's words. Despite being only 6 years old, Jake had sensed Ryan's exaggerated kindness towards him and the occasional coldness Ryan showed me. When I had mentioned going to my parents' house, Jake had happily asked if he could spend time with his grandpa. I realized how strong Jake truly was, especially after the incident at the wedding ceremony. Hearing this, Jake began to cry. He then turned to Kate, who was standing next to Ryan and probably glaring at her, and said, "My mom's the only mom for me." "And who are you, old lady?" Kate, being referred to as an old lady, seemed highly offended and replied, "But you're just being rude," with her voice trembling. I concerned for Jake. I stepped in between them, shielding him from her. I took a deep breath, ready to deliver the final blow to Kate. It's really pathetic for an adult to retort to a 6-year-old. "You're getting so red. Did I hit a nerve? And you should be careful with your constant lies. The diner you work at, isn't it operated by the company my father runs? You didn't recognize the family name?" Upon hearing that, Kate's face turned ghostly white. After pausing for a moment, seemingly deep in thought, she looked at the family name on the sign in front of my childhood home, which made her even paler. She muttered things like, "This can't be true. In no way." But when she saw my father's face, her face went from pale blue to stark white. Though she kept apologizing, my father's stern expression didn't waver. Startled by my father's outburst, both of them fled without looking back. Because of their blinded desires, they involved others, and as a result would face severe consequences. I sued Ryan for emotional damages and for the costs of the wedding venue. On top of that, they were taken into custody by the police for the marriage scam. I heard they were given a suspended sentence. Ryan's parents, after hearing about the situation, apologized to me and covered all the expenses Ryan owed me. Fructi. Ryan is back at his family home, working tirelessly from dawn to dusk to help with the family business. However, he's earning almost nothing to repay the debts and is virtually confined to the property. No news of this incident spread among Ryan's friends, ruining his social relationships. Having a criminal record will surely darken his future prospects. It came to light that Kate habitually feigned sickness to skip work, leading to cold stares from her colleagues. She was close to being promoted but ended up quitting. She's now homeless, living on the streets, and has become unemployed. The two of them broke up, and it seems their dreams of a happy future were crushed, leading them to live lonely lives. I decided not to remarry primarily for Jake's sake. Well, it's beneficial for a child to have a father. I wasn't longing for that, and though I may face criticism for being a single mother, the definition of happiness is determined by the individual, not by outsiders. I plan to support Jake until he becomes independent, ensuring he doesn't face any hardships.